Charles Dickens' Hard Times, Book 3, Gardening. This is a quick summary of the aforementioned book. Lying cast away there. Chapter 1, page 218 to 219. Father, she replied, without stirring, if any harmony has been awakened in her young breast, that was mute in mine until it turned to discord, let her thank heaven for it, and go upon her happier way, taking it as her greatest blessing that she has avoided my way. Oh, my child, he said in a forlorn manner.
I am an unhappy man to see you thus.
What avails it to me that you do not reproach me, if I so bitterly reproach myself? He bent his head and spoke low to her. Louisa, I have a misgiving that some change may have been slowly working about me in this house, by mere love and gratitude, that what the head had left undone and could not do, the heart may have been doing silently. Can it be so? She made him no reply. I am not too proud to believe it, Louisa. How could I be arrogant? And you before me? Can it be so? Is it so, my dear? He looked upon her once more, lying cast away there, and without another word went out of the room. He had not been long gone when she heard a light tread near the door and knew that someone stood beside her. Mr. Gradgrind reacts to Louisa's breakdown, having found her unhappy as to the marriage and having suffered for so long. This sparks the beginning of a change in philosophy, having considered prior that utilitarian hard-cold fact and empiricism to be the only way of discerning truth and believing it to being the best course of action. But this comes up short in relating with others, in empathizing with fellow human persons, and ultimately in failing to consult things of the heart, which have brought about an abandon of the things of virtues, the good, and the human conscience. Too much matter of fact. Chapter 2, page 226. James Harthouse. I am not a moral sort of fellow, he said, and I never made any pretensions to the character of a moral sort of fellow. I am as immoral as need be. At the same time, in bringing any distress upon the lady
who is the subject of the present conversation,
or in unfortunately compromising her in any way, or in committing myself by any expression of sentiments towards her, not perfectly reconcilable with the domestic hearth, or in taking any advantage of her father's being a machine, or of her brother's being a whelp, or of her husband's being a bear. I beg to be allowed to assure you that I have no particularly evil intentions, but have glided on from one step to another with a smoothness of perfectly diabolical, that I had not the slightest idea the catalogue was half so long until I began to turn it over, whereas I find, said Mr. James Harthouse, in conclusion, that it is really in several volumes. Si Jeppe confronts Harthouse and his interference in the affairs of the Gradgrinds, having tried to seduce Louisa and being a mirror image of Tom Gradgrind, the whelp, who lacks morals. He is a cold and calculating man similar to Mr. Gradgrind prior, and embodies his ideology of utilitarian hard facts. The metaphor of machine in describing Mr. Gradgrind highlights how Gradgrind appears to lack humanity or empathy. Harthouse states that he has no evil intentions, just self-serving interests. But then again, proponents of fact and hard empiricism would believe that there is no evil and that morals are subjective. This is a recipe for disaster, propelling individuals to undergo more scheming and engaging in diabolical, unethical matters for the sake of self-serving interests. Condemnation, Chapter 4, page 239 to 240. When Slackbridge unfolded what he called the damning document, and held it up to the gaze and for the execration of the working man community. O my fellow men, behold of what a traitor in a camp of those great spirits who are enrolled upon the holy scroll of justice and of union, is appropriately capable. O my prostrate friends, with the galling yoke of tyrants on your necks, and the iron foot of despotism treading down your fallen forms into the dust of the earth, upon which right glad would your oppressors be to see you creeping on your bellies all the days of your lives, like the serpent in the garden, O my brothers. And shall I, as a man, not add my sisters too? What do you say now of Stephen Blackpool, with a slight stoop in his shoulders, and about 5'7" in height, as set forth in the degrading and disgusting document, the blighting bill, the pernicious placard. This abominable advertisement, and with what majesty of denouncement will crush the viper who would bring the stain and shame upon the godlike race that happily has cast him out forever. Yes, my compatriots, happily cast him out and sent him forth. For you remember how he stood here before, you on this platform. You remember how, face to face and foot to foot, I pursued him through all his intricate windings. You remember how he sneaked and slunk, sidled and splitted of straws until with not an inch of ground to which to claim him out from amongst us, an object for the undying finger of scorn to point at, and for the avenging fire of every free and thinking man to scorch and sear. And now, my friends, my labouring friends, whose hard but honest beds are made in toil, and whose scanty but independent pots are boiled in hardship. And now I say, my friends, what appellation has that dastard craven taken to himself, when with the mask torn from his features, he stood before us in all his native deformity? A what? A thief? A plunderer? A proscribed fugitive with a price upon his head, a fester and a wound upon the noble character of the Coketown operative. Therefore, my band of brothers, in a sacred bond to which your children and your children's children yet unborn have set their infant hands and seals, I propose to you on the part of the United Aggregate Tribunal, ever watchful for your welfare, ever zealous for your benefit, that this meeting does resolve that Stephen Blackpool Weaver, referred to in this placard, having been already solemnly disowned by the community of Coketown hands, the same are free from the shame of his misdeeds, and cannot, as a class, be reproached with his dishonest actions. After being suspected of committing a bank robbery by Mr. Bounderby, Slackbridge and the United Aggregate Tribunal turned against Stephen Blackpool. Notice how Slackbridge jumps on Stephen despite not being proven guilty. Thus, where is the emphasis on innocent until proven guilty? Instead, men jump easily to conclusions to discredit and reject others without the facts or evidence. This is rather unfortunate, since Stephen happened to find himself at odds with the United Aggregate Tribunal prior, in being called Judas Iscariot in Book 2. More biblical allusions are made in which he is said to be like the viper. This is in juxtaposition to the hard-working folks who were said to suffer like the serpent on its belly. He is thus devalued by the eyes of the majority, working-class hands, and thus brings about further persecution, hiding, and eventually would lead to his death, which I'll talk later. Be wary of those who call for blood and vengeance without the proper insight, context, and understanding of the whole situation, because this would lead innocent people to get hurt. Meanwhile, the old lady Miss Pegler, who wanted to see Mr. Bounderby, turns out to be his mother, and Bounderby is exposed to be a liar. Liar Bounderby. Chapter 5, page 252. My own boy, she, Miss Bassett, threatened me that if I resisted her, I should be brought by constables, and it was better to come quietly than make that stir in such a...
Miss Pegler glanced timidly but proudly round the walls.
Such a fine house at this. Indeed, it is not my fault. My dear noble stately boy, I have always lived quietly in secret, Josiah, my dear. I have never broken the condition once. I have never said I was your mother. I have admired you at a distance, and if I have come to town sometimes, with long times between, to take a proud peep at you, I have done it unbeknown, my love, and gone away again. Page 253. Josiah in the gutter? Exclaimed Miss Pegler. No such a thing, sir. Never, for shame on you. My dear boy knows, and will give you to know, that though he came of humble parents, he came of parents that love him as dear as the best could, and never thought it hardship on themselves to pinch a bit that he might write and cipher beautiful, and I've his books at home to show it. Aye, have I, said Miss Pegler with indignant pride, and my dear boy knows, and will give you
To know, sir.
that after his beloved father died when he was only 8 years old, his mother too could pinch a bit, as it was her duty, and her pleasure and her pride to do it, to help him out in life, and put him prentice. And a steady lad he was, and a kind master he had to lend him a hand, and well he worked his own way forward to be rich and thriving. And I'll give you to know, sir, for this my dear boy won't, that though his mother kept but a little village shop, he never forgot her, but pensioned me on £30 a year, more than I want, for I put but out of it, only making the condition that I was to keep down in my own part, and make no boasts about him, and not trouble him. When Mr. Gradgrind inquired to Miss Pegler on what Mr. Bounderby had said on being a self-made success story, rags to riches, Miss Pegler inadvertently exposes Bounderby to having created his entire identity and boastings to be based on a lie. He is not a self-made man from the gutter, but was fortunately handed the privileges of apprenticeship throughout his life. Mr. Bounderby later states that he is not the one on trial, but his reputation has already been foiled and he came across as a loud liar. This is quite unfortunate, but it does stain your reputation, and similar to the boy who cried wolf, now no one would believe you as being self-made, thus taking away one's ability to boast about such when it never happened. Stephen Blackpool's Last Dying Breath. Chapter 6, page 263. The spectre of his old look seemed to pass as he said the word. I have fell into the pit, me dear, as he host with knowledge o' old folk now living, hundreds and hundreds o' men's lives, fathers, sons, brothers, dear to thousands and thousands, and keeping fro want and hunger. I have fell into a pit that being we the fire damp crueler than battle. I read on't in the public petition, as only one may read, fro the men that works in pits, in which they are praying and praying the lawmakers for Christ's sake, not to let their work be murdered to 'em, but to spare 'em for the wives and children that they love, as well as gentlefolk loves theirs. When it were in work, it killed without need. When it is let alone, it kills without need. See how we die and no need, one way and another, in a muddle, every day. He faintly said it, without anger against anyone, merely as truth. Page 264. Following his eyes, she saw that he was gazing at a star. Shining upon me, he said reverently, in my pain and trouble down below. Shine into me mind. I looking at 10 foot thee, Rachel, to the muddle in my mind have laid away about a bit I hope. If some are been wanting in understanding me better, I too have been wanting in understanding them better. Page 265. Often as I come to my sleep and found that shining on me, down there in my trouble, I thought it were the stars guided to our Saviour's home. I almost think it be the very star. Bless thee. Will somebody be pleased to cover my face? They carried him very gently along the fields and down the lanes and over the wide landscape, Rachel always holding the hand in hers. Very few whispers broke the mournful silence. It was soon a funeral procession. The stars shad shown him where to find the God of the poor, and through humility and sorrow and forgiveness he had gone to his Redeemer's rest. Stephen Blackpool, through no fault of his own, fell into a mining hole when trying to get away from all of the persecution against him, despite his innocence. This highlights the existence of the poor, silent victims of a system of quick judgments and tyrannies of the majority when it comes to laying blame at a problem, whether it be theft or some other. Even today's press continue to come up with motives, causes, and scapegoats to lay the blame for one's problems despite not knowing the full context or others' perspectives. Stephen is persecuted and fits well with the motive of Christ, since he was also being persecuted for the sins of others, is led by a star which found Christ as a babe in the manger. In the midst of his death and suffering humility, he becomes sacrificed and scapegoated to become finally at one with peace, truth, and God. Finding Mercy, Chapter 8, page 281. Mr. Gradgrind, Louisa, and Sissy found Tom hidden inside the circus, and Mr. Gradgrind wanted to smuggle him out of the country. The figure named Bitzer, who was accustomed to the philosophy of Gradgrind, wanted to capture Tom and take a higher position in the bank, and working for Mr. Bounderby. Gradgrind asks Mr. Sleary, circus master, to do something, to which he obliges and calls his dog to pin down Bitzer, so Tom can make his escape. The dog was named Merrylegs, Sissy's and her father's dog. Mr. Sleary and Gradgrind reflected on the loyalty of dogs. Mr. Sleary probably helped out since Gradgrind is a politician and may treat him favourably, or perhaps out of the goodness of his heart, since he adopted Cecilia Cicigepe. All this being said, you can see a change in Gradgrind's philosophy, reconsidering things of the heart, after being confronted by his daughter, Tom's theft, Harthouse's schemes, Bounderby's lies, and Stephen's death. Paradigm shift. I'll end this video with this quote from chapter 9, page 286. He was Mr. Gradgrind on the same day, and in the same hour, sitting thoughtful in his own room. How much of futurity did he see? Did he see himself a white-haired, decrepit man bending his hitherto inflexible theories to appointed circumstances, making his facts and figures subservient to faith, hope, and charity, and no longer trying to grind that heavenly trio into the dusty little mills? Did he catch sight of himself, therefore much despised by his late political associates? Did he see them in the era of its being quite settled, that the
national
dustmen have only to do with one another, and owe no duty to an abstraction called a people, taunting the honourable gentleman with this and with that and with what not, 5 nights a week until the small hours of the morning? Probably he had that much foreknowledge, knowing his men. This quote references 1 Corinthians 13:1-13, where it talks about faith, hope, and charity, which are beyond mere fact and reason, but are qualities of virtue. As a result, this highlights how Mr. Gradgrind no longer considers these to be something that needs to be suppressed in the schools and factories, but it is already too little too late. His contemporaries, such as the likes of James Harthouse and most politicians, are removed from the so-called abstraction of the people, arguing and taunting for their own sake, and looking at figures, facts, and statistics as opposed to feeling suffering citizens. This is quite reminiscent of today's politicians, as well as society's indifference to the poor, working, and underclass whom labour and toil and remain ignored by those in power or are exploited by them for self-profit. Preferably, this ordeal has made everyone better, has made the characters in this book better, in learning the value of emotions and the value of human connectivity, which is a valuable lesson indeed. All in all, do not lose your humanity. Do not lose your soul to hard, cold, all-consuming fact, but instead be able to feel and connect and empathize with others as well. This is not an all or none scenario. You don't have to completely use your head alone or your heart alone. Why not use both? Marry reason with empathy, logic with emotional connection, and knowledge with love. So this concludes my video on Hard Times by Charles Dickens. I would recommend that you read this book. It's quite good, and hope you've enjoyed my series on it. Bye bye.